So welcome back. Welcome once again. I'm here with my good friend and colleague, Rachel Singleton. This is Ian Watson. We're going to have another healing conversation today. And the topic that we'd like to explore, which we're very much in the throes of exploring for ourselves, is around what it looks like when well-being starts to re-emerge for someone who's maybe lost sight of it. Maybe for a short time, maybe for a long time. How can we recognize that? And what is true mental health? There's a lot of discussion at the moment around the topic of mental health, but mostly it's really about mental illness and mental suffering. There isn't really much, I've noticed, there isn't much that's been shared about what mental health really looks like. How do we learn to recognize that? It's something that we're in the process of exploring individually in our own work, in our own lives, and also together in these conversations. So we just like to make that an open conversation and see what it touches for you.
Yeah, because it's very common for someone and very reasonable for someone to come to us as a practitioner and they have things that are wrong in their life, whether it's things that feel wrong in their body, symptoms, conditions, illnesses, or whether it's something that feels wrong in their emotional life, and to want to make that better. And we've touched on this in different ways already in some of the other healing conversations, that in and of itself is not wrong. And a natural goal to have. We want to have increased well-being. We want to feel better in our world and in ourselves. But sometimes there can be a type of approach which is around fixing or making things go away, rather than taking that deeper journey into where that's leading, what has been the genesis of this current condition or state, what's actually behind it, and what happens if we go in and unravel some of those knots that are leading to this state of tension and stress. So if we are coming to a treatment or a therapy or a person wanting something to go away, and then that doesn't seem to go away, or at least not immediately, then what is happening there? And are there other signs that we are moving in the right direction, even if our symptoms are not yet disappearing? And I think in our experience, you and I, Ian, have both found that there very much are these other signs that the person is starting to come back to themselves.
Yeah, they're on their way, even if though they may well not recognize that straight away. Yeah, one of the first things that I came to kind of have eyes for and see the value of was someone that I was working with who maybe had been very happy for me to have more of a passive role. For me just to prescribe for them as a homeopath or give advice to them, in terms of how they might get well. And then all of a sudden, or gradually, they would start to want to participate in that much more. And I started to see that was a good sign. Even though it could be troublesome for me as a practitioner.
Yes.
Because there's certain advantages for practitioners to have a compliant patient, who just does what you think is a good idea. And funnily enough, within the medical model, there's been a lot of discussion over the years about client resistance, patient resistance. Why it's been studied. Why do patients seem to resist the treatment that's the very treatment that's supposed to be doing them good? There's a kind of illogic in that, and yet there's actually a deeper wisdom often operating there when a person starts to reject. It's not that they're necessarily rejecting the treatment per se. I think what we start to reject is the idea that someone else knows better than we do what we need. So I would see that as one of the wake-up signs initially, when a person starts to see that I've got my own wisdom here, and I've got my own ability to make decisions on my own behalf, and
Yeah.
I've got my own way of knowing what's right for me and what isn't,
Yes.
which is something that's coming from within me, and it may not coincide with what the so-called experts think is good for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm aware as we're speaking that there's a little bit of glitchiness to the recording, so I suggest we keep on going and see if we can get through it. Yeah, so we'll keep going, and hope the recording picks up our voices on this. I think this goes back to one of the things we were talking about in the last conversation, which was around autonomy and personal authority, our kind of sovereignty. And like you, I think when I see someone start to reclaim that, where they're directing their healing more than me, where they're not saying, can you tell me what to do, but feeling into what they need to do, that's incredibly important and a real step forward in someone's journey. Often, one of the things that sort of seems to come with that, I often see a change in someone's demeanour, their bearing. This is particularly face-to-face consultation with people. And, there's a sense in which when we're weighed down by things, we are in our body, we are pushed down. And when I see someone with me more, with more eye contact, with more confidence, with perhaps more alignment in their body, then again that sense of, yes, someone is literally coming into alignment, they're coming into their center, they're coming into their power, and you can see and feel that in the way that they're coming across. The voice can change as well. When we're vulnerable, we can sound more childlike, we can sound more hesitant, and as we begin to find our way forward, then we start to sound stronger. Our voice can deepen and become more authoritative, become slower and more considered, whatever it might be.
Yeah, these are all nice because they're kind of visible, aren't they? And again, not always to the person themselves straight away. It's often other people will see that and reflect that back. They'll notice that a person is maybe holding themselves differently, or the way that they speak is changing. Another thing that I've noticed is that I think self-acceptance is such a big part of a healing journey. Because if you think about it, like what's the flip side of self-acceptance would be some kind of self-judgment, which means that you're in conflict with yourself at some level. And as it starts to be recognized, that maybe you've just been very hard on yourself in ways that you hadn't seen, or maybe that you've adopted some ways of being that really don't fit you, that they're not really yours. It's something that was modeled to you and you picked it up, or it was something that was just drummed into you from this is how you got to be, this is how you have to behave. And then you start to realize that conditioned way of being, or habitual way of being, really goes against the grain in terms of who you really are.
And that time when you start to unpick those things that have kind of kept you in place in your world, they're the things that have kept you nice and orderly and a good member of society and doing all the things that your parents or whoever told you should do. And there comes a point when you naturally start to have to look beneath them and look behind them and see, well, are they true for me now? And is it real for me to actually live from those beliefs, or do I need to form my own beliefs and update all of that and kind of reprogram myself, get some updates in the program that are actually more congruent to who I am now? Yeah,
it's a nice metaphor, isn't it? It's like without thinking, we update our system software regularly for our gadgets and our computers and our phones. But do we do that internally? Very often. We don't voluntarily do that. We do it because we have to. And
Yeah.
and the reason we have to, as you've mentioned, is because that way of being is no longer serving our interests and
Yeah.
our growth. And in fact, it's become an impediment.
And is maybe also the very thing that's behind the current tension and the current stress that's going on in our life, that we're acting in ways we think we should. We're doing what we think we have to, rather than really listening into that deep self. And that deep self is in distress because it's not being heard, because our natural, fluent, authentic way of being is not being allowed expression in the world. There's too many shoulds and have tos, putting fences around that.
Yeah. So
Stopping us growing.
Yeah. So another thing that then starts to appear is, I would say, more freedom.
Yeah.
In the person's life, more freedom to make your own choices, your own decisions, and to really express yourself in a way that's really true to who you are.
Yeah.
Whether that's in your work life, your personal life, your creative life, or across the board. It doesn't matter. It's very individual. But just starting to see that, as you've said, that where there's been some conditionality, some idea of how we have to be, having that fall away creates a space within which we can really start to find out, what is it that wants to express itself through me.
Yeah, and that sense of space and that sense of possibility, suddenly the horizons expand, don't they? We can go places and do things that we didn't think we could do.
Right.
Yeah. I remember when I was early on in my healing journey, when I'd kind of first discovered homeopathy and essences and things like this, and was still working through a huge amount of stuff. And I remember time and time again, I would come back to this kind of inner vision that represented for me how I felt at that time. And it's like if you were to imagine a glove and a hand inside that that's so tiny that it isn't filling any of that space. And I felt like that was me in my life, that I was this tiny little hand, but I wasn't filling out and expanding the space that was allocated to me. I wasn't being fully in my own space. And I was kind of cramped in because of how I'd thought I had to be. And the gradual sense of learning how to fill that space was just an amazing journey. Yeah.
So it's like, in a way, kind of allowing more of yourself to come forth.
Kind of the courage and the daring to be more fully yourself, to show that more fully in the world. I think that's a real sign of increasing well-being in someone.
Yeah. I think another facet to that also is to be able to include more of the human experience. It's not to exclude, but it's actually to include more. Because what I've seen is that one of the big sources of struggle is that we get very conditional about what we think we should be feeling and experiencing. And again, it's learned, it's innocent. We're all taught from a young age. I was taught, big boys don't cry.
Yeah.
And, you've got to be a certain way to get on in the world. Girls get a similar but different kind of conditioning about how to be nice and, this kind of thing. And it stays with us until we reach a point where we start to feel boxed in by that. Because as a human, it seems to me we're required to feel a whole spectrum of different feeling states and emotional experiences. But if we've learned that there's certain things that are taboo for us, we shouldn't be experiencing that, then again, we're in conflict with ourselves.
Yeah.
Because there are situations where it would feel absolutely that my body wants to cry,
Yes.
That's actually what's needed for my well-being, is I just need to let myself be feeling that. And yet I've got this script running in my head that's like says, no, don't do that. That's not what you're supposed to be doing as a man. And so that has to fall away. And then I discover that in the allowing of that, I gain, I don't lose. It adds a richness to my life, and it gives me an ability to empathize and be compassionate for other people.
That's what I was going to say, because there's that there's that beautiful sense of a reclaimed permissiveness for yourself,
Yeah.
where suddenly, well, actually, this is just emotion, this is just energy, and it needs to move through me, and I can be all right with that.
Yeah.
And maybe I can actually just relax into this and see where it goes, rather than clench around it and shut it down and push it away, which is the least healing response that we can have.
Mm.
So as we become more permissive with ourselves and more tolerant with ourselves and more compassionate with ourselves, then one of the things that I really notice is how there's much less judgment then going on about other people who we have been perceiving to be acting in ways which are not right.
Yeah.
You know, and now there's this sense of, well, almost like live and let live, because there's a much greater tolerance for yourself. It just naturally ripples out.
Yeah, you get to extend it out, but it seems to need to be that way around.
It definitely does.
It has to be recognized within oneself first, and then it can be shared.
Yeah, I feel like a real hallmark of someone getting to a very good place in their journey is when the necessary, in some cases, preoccupation with self starts to give way to a sense of, how can I serve? How can I be of service to something bigger? So I think there's a time in our journey when for many people, they haven't had that permission to really look at themselves and to really focus on themselves. And that's a very important reclaiming. If that hasn't been done, it needs to be done.
And you can't bypass that step.
You can't. You've got to learn your yeses and your nos, and when to say them, and what's permissible and what's going to work for you. And you've got to feel into that and give yourself a good amount of time in which to really grow that sense of permission around yourself and acceptance. But then there comes a time where if we stayed there, that would become unhealthy. That would be too self-obsessed. We're too much focused on me. And the point when we then start to shift out of that, I'm pretty good here now. I can start to look at, well, how can I be of service in the world? How can I be of service to others? What's the bigger picture here? If I move beyond myself, what's going on in the world that maybe needs my unique skills and my unique talents? And I love to see that. I love that when someone naturally just starts to think, oh, actually, do you know what? I'm getting a bit self-obsessed here.
Yeah. That's really interesting, because I think, I've worked with particularly friends and colleagues, I've seen go through this, who are working in the helping profession, but there's something around that piece has been missing. So, it's easy for us as helpers and healers to get caught in the idea that we're here just to serve, and there's a kind of assumption in that we're okay, we don't need we don't need the healing. We do it on other people's behalf, and yet that catches up with us at a certain point, and very often it's like it has to get turned around. The spotlight has to get turned on us for a while, which is often the harder part of the journey. We've been very outward focused. It's been very focused in other people's direction. I've noticed people are often very reluctant to take that time for themselves. But it's necessary.
It really is.
And for that very reason that you just described, it's if we don't connect with those places within ourselves genuinely, then we're not really able to serve and be healthy and to stay healthy without losing our sense of self, or without compromising our own health, our own well-being in some way. So that's an interesting thing to see. I think what we're going to see emerge obviously is going to be individual. A lot depends on where you're starting from, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
For someone who's been very much giving away all of their life energy in the service of others, the starting point might often be that they have to reclaim it and really focus inwards for a time. But for someone who's, as you say, has reached a point where the emphasis has been on self for a necessary and certain period, very often that needs to turn in a different direction. It needs to be harnessed and put to some something, put in the service of something which is not personal to them. It's thy will be done, not mine time,
Yeah. And still that, in order to do that successfully, they still need to be caring for themselves. It's a balancing act between the two, isn't it? I'm passionate about self-care. I work with practitioners who do mentoring sessions, and we're working together, and time again, I feel like I'm the spokesperson for their self-care, to just remind them to really look after themselves, to be, a strong tendency amongst therapists in particular, practitioners, carers, to think that they can't or haven't got time for, or even shouldn't do that practice, that they shouldn't have the self-care bit, that's selfish. And it isn't. It's vital and necessary. And it becomes selfish when we feel like we are stopping about people, and we'll know we're too absorbed in ourselves, or others will tell us.
Right, we'll
others around us will point it out to us.
Yeah.
And we'll get the feedback. Yeah.
I think the other thing that I've noticed around emotional psychological well-being is it's not that people get to feel less upset or less troubled, or those feelings may even be experienced more frequently than they were before, because there's more acceptance, there's more allowance of that. You learn that actually it's okay to feel annoyed, it's okay to feel sad, it's part of the human experience. However, at the same time, there's a recognition that it's temporary. It's just energy passing through, as you say. You don't have to live there.
Yeah. It's just it's less impactful, isn't it?
It's less impactful because there's a recognition that that's not the truth of who you are. It's a momentary experience that's been created, and we have built into us the capacity to let things go. And to recover and to come back to our center very, very quickly, just like we did as young children.
Yes.
So I think, to me, that's also one of the indicators of moving in the direction of health and well-being, is that we become more childlike in that respect.
Yeah.
We feel things fully and maybe quite intensely, spontaneously, without all the judgment about it and without, the conditions that we used to put on it. We just feel it.
Yeah.
Something happens and we feel it, but we don't hang on to it.
Yeah.
We're just as willing to let it go as we are willing to let it be experienced, which means that we get to bounce back and be in life much more. We get to be more present in life, and we don't spend a long time getting stuck in a feeling state that's, relatively heavy for us. And,
which is often about resisting it in the first place, isn't it?
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
It's the resistance that keeps us stuck.
That's right.
It's actually the immersion in it, and then the letting go is staying present.
Yeah.
That's staying alive to the moment and what is and what's coming through and what's real for us, and then moving into the next moment. Yeah. Because it doesn't have to be a record that we get stuck in for hours and days and weeks.
Yeah. So we get to be more present.
Yeah.
We get to spend more time living in real time, actually present. And being present is amazing, because there's a lot of richness in life that we miss when we're not present. That's already there. It's just waiting to come in. It's waiting for us to notice.
And there's a real lightness of spirit about that. Again, that's something I notice it. The way that it comes across in people is just this, much more lightness, more buoyancy, more resilience, a sense of, I can bounce back from this, I can cope with this, I've got this experience now of being able to traverse X, Y, and Z over the last few weeks, and I'm still living and I'm still fine, and my life hasn't fallen apart, and even if it's fallen apart, I'm fine as well. And just this sense of and it's like, and there's something about, I can live in my life, I can meet my life, I can be with it, and I don't have to try and control it and shut down around it and make it go in a certain direction as I perceive it should be. I can actually take the journey.
Oh, that's nice. I love that. So another recognizable sign would be that there's more of a acquiescence to the flow of life,
Mm.
and yeah, less need to think that you personally have to be in charge of it all, managing it.
Mm.
I think
Mm.
that is also that's part of this direction, isn't it? That we're pointing towards, is that
Yeah.
there's more ease, but there's also more trust that comes with that.
Yeah.
There's a deeper trust that, yes, stuff can happen and I can bounce back, and there's also a trust in that, that life itself takes care of us if we let it.
Mm. Yeah.
It's not on us personally
Yeah.
in the way
Yeah.
that we thought it was.
Yeah.
It's not on us to manage it all the time and to worry about it and be
Yeah.
anxious about it,
Yeah.
either for ourselves or for other people. There's a big letting go that comes, which leads to I find, an ever deepening trust in the intelligence of life itself.
Mm. Mm. And seeing that rekindled in someone, seeing that starting to guide someone in their life again when they've maybe lost that, they've lost their faith in that, they've lost their ability to connect with that. Seeing that come back, I mean, it comes back with joy in its folds. You can't feel that and not feel a certain connection to joy again. And I think it also gives people, it gives them back confidence.
Yeah.
It's like it's an innate confidence. It's a confidence that goes really deep, because it isn't about confidence in yourself. It's about confidence in this life. And that's something very precious.
Mm.
Mm.
Mm. Nice.
Mm.
I feel like there's more we could say, but I also feel like that's a really nice kind of taster.
Yeah.
Usually taster of what this topic touches upon.
And I think there's something in here as well that we need to come back to at some point, and that's around how our thoughts create our reality. Because you kind of have touched in on it a little bit today, and yeah, I think at some point one of our future conversations needs to be about that.
Well, that understanding of the role that thought plays in creating our individual experience has been life-changing for me, and it forms the basis of my work, as you know.
Yeah, well, I feel it is your life work,
and it has
to
done
work
for,
with this.
yeah, many years now, and I feel like that is it's just such a helpful piece. It would be criminal to leave it out of these conversations.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we can come around to that anytime. Anytime you like.
Okay.
Thank you, Rachel, once again.
Thank you, Ian. That's been lovely.
And we'll meet again soon and have another healing conversation for you.